Danışma kurulumuzun çok değerli üyesi Hülya Deniz Alp'ten öğrendiğimiz bir şey var, yaşayarak öğrenmek. Sosyal girişimini yaşayarak öğrenme üzerine kuran ve bugün buraya sizlerle birlikte olmak için Almanya'dan gelen, Ashoka Almanya'nın ilk üyesi, Batı Avrupa'nın en başarılı sosyal girişimcilerinden biri olan Dr. Andreas Heinecke bizimle. Kendisine değerli vaktini, bilgisini ve tecrübesini ayırdığı için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Mr. Heinecke.
So, well, hello everybody and good morning. And thank you so much, I think, for coming here and listening, I think, to my tiny story. I hope you can hear the work headsets are working. You can hear me? Evet? Kan me? It was Turkish. Okay, well, how to start? You know, I'm a social entrepreneur now for quite a long time, 23 years. And what I'm doing is I'm selling darkness, and I push people to employ blind people. And you can imagine this is not a bestseller, because who wants to sell and to buy darkness? And who wants to employ blind people? Nobody. And maybe this is exactly, I think, maybe the mystery of my life and of the story I will share with you, that this is now working for 23 years. And I will start to tell you a little bit about myself and how this came up. You know, when you do such strange things I do, there's a long story behind. And when I was thinking for a long time why I'm doing what I'm doing, for a long time I think my life was pretty fragmented. I did a lot of different jobs and I was never happy. And then in the moment it was so clear, when I was clear and I had the chance to do what I'm doing, I thought, okay, what was my history, what was my story? And in fact, thinking back, when I was 9 years old, I had a really pain. You know, I grew up in Germany. I'm German, and in a village, and we were somehow a middle-class family. And in my neighborhood there were a lot of boys, and there was one boy, and his name was Alphonse. And he was, how to say, today we would say he was mentally disordered. In these days he was just a fool. And he was a guy with Down syndrome. And you know how boys are. When we played and Alphonse came up, immediately he was, of course, the object of desire, and immediately he was beaten. Immediately he was kicked, and immediately he was beaten. And all the time Alphonse was somehow, let's say, a wonderful, like a ball to play with. And I was 9 years old, and I was standing with the other boys, and everybody was, yes, beat him, kick him. And I felt so ashamed about myself, and really in pain, that I was not able to stand up and to say, listen guys, stop beating Alphonse on one side, and on the other side, of course, I was questioning myself, why now the boys from my village are beating all the time the weakest one. So there was a pain on one side that I was not, let's say, empowered, not strong enough to stand up and to say stop, because I was in danger to be beaten by the other guys, since I don't want it. And on the other side, I felt really very bad that the weakest boy was beaten all the time. Second story. I was 13 years old in these days. And you know, boys 13 years old, they like either cowboys or knights, but I like German soldiers. And I liked very much, you know, I had a huge army of plastic tanks and plastic soldiers, and I knew all the battles. And when one day there was a TV documentation about the Second World War, and the German aircraft went down and bombed, I don't know what, Kiev or Brussels, I have no idea. And I was really, wow, this was fantastic. This was a really good moment watching. And there was a situation when the film short sequence where the Jewish people were put on the trains and sent to the camps, to the concentration camps, and you know what happens. And in this moment when such an image occurred, I said, and they are the guilty ones that we lost the war. They are the Jews, are the guilty ones why Germany lost the war. And my mother was behind me, and in a moment she started crying. And I said, hey, what's on? Do you have any pity with the Jews, or what's on? And she said, listen, I have to tell you a story. Her family was Jewish, and they were all killed. My mother survived, of course. And from this moment on, this was really a shock for me that my family on one side was exterminated in the war. And this was really a big, big shock. And the next day, I painted all my plastic tanks white and put a red cross on it. So it was the first disarming initiative with toys. Third story, I was embarrassed. From 13 on until 17 years, I tried to understand how it could happen in Germany and globally, that all the time people are, let's say, excluded and exterminated. So I made my PhD about it, I studied history, I visited, I think, lots of concentration camps, I had a lot of talks with survivors. I really had a lot of pain and tried to understand what the hell happened in Germany and how it could happen that in wartime 6 million people could be killed, and how was the mechanism. I really tried to understand. And when I stopped my studies, I started working for a radio station in Germany. And one day I was asked by my director if I can imagine a work training for a guy who lost his sight by an accident. And I had no understanding about blind people, I had no understanding about disabled people, and I said, oh my goodness, what he can do, 28 years old, car accident, both no more eyesight, this life is not valuable, it's not funny to be blind. And I went up to his house, and I rang the bell and said, and the door was opened. And first surprise, there was a handsome guy who looked more like a rock and roll singer. And I said, sorry about that, maybe I'm on the wrong door. I'm looking for the blind. And he said, yes, I'm the blind. Well, and we don't look like a blind. How does a blind look like? Okay, this was a bit surprising for me that he didn't look blind. And then we went in his apartment, and then we went down the staircase and said, hey, take care. There's a staircase. I said, yes, I know. He didn't fall down. He knows exactly where to go. I said, wow, how we can manage. Then we sat down on the couch, and he poured some coffee. He said, hey, can I help you? I said, no, it's okay. And he poured the coffee, and it was not spilled over. Then, the most dangerous situation, he started smoking, and I said, oh my goodness, his house been burned down. His house didn't burn down. So I think, to make it short, I was so surprised about his way, about his capabilities, about his way, in fact, I think, to manage the situation. And honestly speaking, he was in a much more positive mood than I was in these days. Because I had all the time, let's say, the shadows of my family history, and I tried to understand, And what was really embarrassing is that I, with my family history and with all my education, I judged so quickly and found this life is not valuable because he's blind. And this was for me maybe the most important, let's say, wake-up call, that even with my background, I'm tempted to judge so quickly and can imagine that this life being blind is somehow valuable, can be somehow beautiful. Well, this is in fact the history, and then of course I tried, I think, to understand what can I do, what can I do, I think, to change the mindset towards blind people, towards otherness, because I understand, of course, I think the extermination, the killing starts with the mental concept. You think the other guy has not a valuable life, maybe it's even a relief. You think, okay, you are mentally prepared. And then I think at the final end, I think you are open, or you don't cheer up, or you don't say anything when people are, let's say, excluded and in consequence exterminated. And I understood, wow, what can we do, I think, to change this concept? What has to be done? And I had an idea, and the idea was very simple. I think we have to turn off the light and make it pitch dark. And then, of course, we have to bring people in who are, let's say, managing the other crowd in the dark. So it's a role reversal. You are blind, and the lights are sighted. And this happened now 23 years back. And believe me, I was looking for a long, long time. What can I do? Where's my position? I went to a monastery, I went to a mission to Africa, I worked as a journalist, I made my PhD. All the time I knew after a certain while, that's not my story. And it took me until I was 30 years old, in fact, I think, to find my place, and then I think to know what I have to do. So it means, in my understanding, well, I think there was no strategy, there was no planning, there was no, let's say, how to say, preparation for it. It was just, I just had to accept, I think, the consequence of my life. And when people ask me today, well, why are you doing it? I have to tell, lack of alternatives. I have no other choice. I can only do what I'm doing, dark business, and on a global scale. You know, when I studied and made my PhD about the Eastern Jewishness, I came along with a German Jewish philosopher, Martin Buber. And he said for me, I think maybe it's the most important sentence I heard so far, somehow my mantra, this is my leitmotif, and he said, the only way to learn is by encounter. And when I look back and when I try to understand how I learned, then definitely I think by meeting people, by being open to understand people, by the encounter, by meeting people. So, well, I wouldn't say I think forget all the formal education, but for myself, I knew that the encounter is Alphonse in the first moment, then of course with my mother in a very critical moment in my life, and later on with Matthias. This was the name of the blind journalist whom I met 25 years back actually. These were for me the turning points in my life, and I had to do something out of it. Okay, so but in a moment, you know, when you have an understanding about the situation, I think you have to make it consequent. You have to be consequent. The question is, okay, what I'm doing now with all this, what I did, and what is painful for me. And I was old, and I started Dark in the Dark in '88. Okay, what is Dark in the Dark about? You know, it's an exhibition, I have to tell you. It's an exhibition, it can be 400 square meters, it can be 200 square meters, and it has different scenarios, different rooms. And the rooms are designed in a very, very realistic way. That means we have a park, we have a city side, you can make a boat cruise, and you end up in a bar. And everything is completely dark on one side, and then you have sounds, you have winds, you can smell, and this is how to say the principle of the design of the exhibition. And as I said, in the room, it's pitch dark. When you are coming, you have to pay an admission fee, and you are then collected in a group out of 8 to 10 people. You are equipped with a white cane, you are going through a maze, and at the end of the maze, a voice says, hello, my name is whatever, and welcome to Dark in the Dark, are you okay? People say, yes, I'm okay. People are, of course, in the moment very, let's say, stressed, and they are very, let's say, anxious, because they are completely losing any control. And then the guide opens the door, and then you enter into this nature, and you are going through, and little by little, I think a very, very fundamental transformation happens with all the people who went through the last 23 years. In the beginning, you have no idea what's going to happen. You are completely lost in a certain way. And you cannot understand that without eyesight you can do anything. But after a short while, I think this is really fantastic how your body is adapting to the situation. You are more and more comfortable, and so there is all the time, let's say, a fundamental transformation from fear in the beginning to fun at the end. And all the time, of course, there is this guidance by blind people who know exactly where you are, who know exactly who you are, who knows exactly what has to be done. So I think this whole reversal is very, very strong, that your understanding about blindness, about